Showing you how to rejuvenate your used car DNA, or department's natural aptitude, is Doug Haddon, Executive Director with Odessa Auctions. Please give him a warm welcome.
Good morning. Thanks everybody for being here. This is NADA 100, and it's been a great time so far. Hopefully we'll continue to do that. Today, thanks for being in this session. This is how to rejuvenate your used vehicle department's DNA. That's your department's natural aptitude. As you can see on the screen, there's a lot of parts and pieces to the DNA of your store in general. But today we're going to focus on your used car department. We're going to talk about how those parts and pieces fit into the whole picture of your dealership, and how we can maybe make some changes, identify them, and make those changes for the better in your DNA. So today we're going to talk about a couple things. We're going to kind of look at the overall DNA. We're going to try to figure out how that actually fits in with our software and the data that we use. I would say that's a very big piece of the DNA of your used vehicle department. And as well, we're going to look at the processes kind of driven by that software. And then I would say the largest piece of your DNA is your people. Without that, the software, the data, and all the processes you could have in place, your DNA will just fall apart. So a couple things about the DNA. Let's start with that software. Software is, last time I was reading I believe it was the December publication of NADA's reports, I forget what they call it, I'm sorry. There's 17 separate pieces of software operating in your dealership on average. Now, 17 pieces of software, and we know that all those folks that came in and sold us that software promised us that it was a push and a pull. All that software would speak to each other. And I guess part of that is making sure, you want to make sure that software is talking and is communicating properly, and we'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. But what happens is that generates data. You're gathering all the data on your customers, and you're gathering data on performance of staff and employees and managers. Real important stuff to make sure that you have the right data so you can make right decisions. One thing that I've noticed over the course of the last few years, as we engage, as we have our staff and our managers engage with that software, without the proper policies and without the proper procedures, it's really tough to get them to engage and adapt. I mean, think about it this way. The last time you bought a piece of software, had it installed in your dealership, and then asked your staff, your sales managers, your salespeople to start using it, was that a great day or what? You know, to them, it's just another login that they're going to forget. It's another issue where they're probably going to have to learn to cut and paste VIN numbers to get them into each separate website or software package that you bought. And without the proper procedure in place, and without being able to prove to them that it will help them accomplish their goals, whether that's selling cars, parts, service, or whatever it is, they're going to figure out ways to shortcut it. And every time they figure out a way to shortcut it, that's where your data is at risk. You're not getting the right data to be able to make the right decisions. So make sure you have that process and policy in place. And I'm going to, during this course of time, I'm going to give you guys a couple challenges. Here's kind of the first one. We need to make sure that we have those policies in place from inquiry to follow-up and retention for our customers. What I want you to do is go to the internet, make up your a persona, so to say. Find yourself could be a Gmail account. It could be anything you want to make up. bobsmith@yahoo.com, whatever it is. Use that email account to make an inquiry on a sale in your used car department. Now, what I would do is that the third-party provider that you feel is your most effective. Go to that third-party provider, pick a car, and make an inquiry. Now, some of you will be, hey, that's exactly what I expected. The process was in place from inquiry to follow-up. Unfortunately, I think some of you are going to be a little disappointed with what happens when you make that inquiry. But these are the things we need to look at as it regards to the policy and the procedures that we have in place to make sure that our software is being used properly and that our data is actually good. Again, I hope that you look at it and you get that inquiry, you put that in, and I hope it's great. I hope there's no surprises. For you that do that and you get some surprises, a couple things. One, don't fly off the handle, okay? I know we all will be tempted to do that. Instead, use that as a great learning tool. Okay, now that you know, there's a lot of things that we do. We monitor phone calls. We pay to have phone calls monitored, and sometimes we listen to them as the dealer. The manager should always be listening to those phone calls. But getting involved personally with that inquiry to follow up to retention process, I think you will find some great learning and teaching opportunities. You'll learn a lot about what's going on in your store, and you'll be able to actually help the folks learn what really needs to go on. You'll be able to better enforce your policy on the procedures that should be in place. And frankly, that's part of the DNA you may have to change. If you realize that those policies and the procedures that you've put in place, they're really not working, then go ahead, that way you get the opportunity to change them. But experiencing it firsthand is really the best way to develop that learning opportunity. So that brings us into the people, your managers, your staff, whether it's parts, service, body, and again, we're going to focus, we're bringing this into used cars, but we do have to touch, because used cars touch everything. They touch parts, they touch service, they touch body shop, everything. But when you're talking about your staff and your managers, once you realize a learning situation, there's a place that your DNA is a little out of whack and you need to change it, whether that's some operation that you think the procedure should be changed, whether that is a new piece of software that's not doing what you think it should do. When it comes down to making that change, again, it's your people that you need to make sure that they're getting the correct learning situation. What I mean by that is, for years and years in our industry, it was a slam push down. Whenever we saw something that wasn't right, whenever we decided to change whatever policy or procedure we needed to change, it was a slam push down. And almost, it was almost too rough. And sometimes we push people out or push people away, but we got to do it in a way now that we understand the needs of our managers, the needs of our salespeople, the needs of our staff. And these are millennials. These are not the folks that the way we used to manage our folks. It needs to change. So just be aware that with your people, when you find that thing that needs to be changed, whether it's a policy or a procedure for the software that they're using, policy procedure for how they're interacting with our customers, be aware that you need to attack that a little differently. You need to make sure that they understand what's needed and help them get to that end and do it in less than a push-down way like we used to. Okay, with all the software and the data that we probably have untold amount of reports that you can pull out of your software that runs your dealership, one of the 17 obviously that we have, and each separate one has different reports. Now when we're talking about used car sales, used car profitability, again, just in that alone, there's probably over 100 reports you can look at, breaking it down by salespeople, sales managers, breaking it down by campaigns, however you want to look at it. I'm going to give you a little bit of a challenge today. We're going to back off the high technology, and we're going to talk about a different way to look at it. Because, growing up in the car business, it was always your gross is your down payment is your gross. It's like, I'm not sure that even applies at all anymore. It's always the high five for I get a 5-pounder and everybody's high five, and that typically doesn't happen anymore. And the reason that doesn't happen anymore is, for one thing, it's outdated. Customers are more aware. Actually, most customers know more about the cars that we're selling than some of our salespeople do. They know more about the pricing than our salespeople do. So the high-fiving, the 10-pounder, the 5-pounder, this is great. That's a thing almost of the past, and maybe it should be, and here's why. If you have a showroom full of awards that says top dealership of the year, the month, the whatever it is, you sell more cars than anybody else. Your salespeople have top salesperson for 24 months in a row in their office. You know, the folks that are buying these cars today, that scares them. They don't want to be, they may not want to even go in because they see all those plaques about how great of a salesperson this guy is or this gal is, and they don't want to be sold. They're afraid they might accidentally buy a car. Same thing with the big five, you know, the high five with the 5 pounders. The mentality of I think not only the consumer, but I think some of our sales staff has changed. So let's think about this a different way. Profit per day, some of our most highest achieving dealerships in their used vehicle operations are making a move to this profit per day. And I'll show you what that looks like here in just a second. It's a super easy formula that anybody can do, because some of the systems that we use now, some of the software that we have, they run algorithms to tell us, you know, what car we should buy, what one performs higher, turns faster, higher gross profit. This is a snapshot per car of your real return on investment. It's simply the gross of the sale, but minus the commissions, and then you divide that by the number of days, and it gives you a profit per day on that vehicle sold. And it truly is we try to gauge ROI. What's my real return on investment? Because we all, as a dealer, you have a huge investment. What's my return on investment in my used car operation? Let's look at it with some numbers. It gets a little I usually don't like to do a lot of numbers. It get a little confusing, but I'm going to make this simple and easy. I kind of average some things out. I went through a lot of deals. Sat in the office and a dealership, and I went through a lot of deals and kind of got some averages. And we'll talk about that as we go through here. So the default is it's a $15,000 vehicle. You went out and you bought it from the auction. You took it in trade. It doesn't matter how you acquired the vehicle. It's the fact that you invested $15,000 in this vehicle. So $15,000 investment. The front end gross profit was $2,000 on the sale. Now, the F&I department is not really a factor in profit per day. So in all my examples, I will show $1,000, but so it'll be a wash. It is a variable and not based on the vehicle. So I'll show it as a wash, but I do want to show you that it's in there. So that's a $3,000 gross profit. Your commissions, and I figure 30% commission on average from some of the deals that I saw, call that salespeople and sales management commissions. Take that out and that gives you $2,100. At $2,100 of profit, again that's minus the commissions, $2,100 of profit, that car was sold in 20 days. That gives you a $105 profit per day. So every day that vehicle sat on your lot, it was $105. Now, obviously, the shorter it sits on the lot, the higher the profit per day. And, you know, it might be okay for a high five for a 105 profit per day. Hey, man, I got $105 profit per day on that vehicle. That was a great sale. Now, let's look at something that's not so great. So, scenario number 2, front-end profit was $500 because this car's been sitting on your lot for 60 days. We're going to go ahead and wash that out at $1,000 for the F&I. Gives us a $1,500 gross profit. And here's the thing that kind of drives me crazy sometimes. We will pay our salespeople to walk around a car for 90 days and then give them a bonus for selling it when they do, when they stop walking around it and actually selling it. Instead of coming up to the sales manager going, hey, it's I found this car had a scratch, it had a bad tire, it had whatever it was that was keeping our customers from actually looking at the car and keeping our salespeople walking around it. They'll just continue to walk around it and go sell an easier car, not telling us what's up with that car. So anyway, pet peeve, we actually bonus our salespeople for walking around our cars for 90 days. So in that case, we had to pay a $600 flat commission. So that's a $900 gross profit. 900 divided by the 68 days that car sat on the lot, that gives you $13 a day. I know the math's not big, but just think of it. So you got 100 plus, you got barely over 10 profit per day. It's a pretty black and white thing to think about. Now here's the guy in the back of the room, the used car guy that always stands up and says, hey Doug, there's a rear for every seat. I don't care how long I keep that car. I knock it out of the park on cars that sit for 90 days and I still make a big gross. And to that I say, let's take a look at that. So we'll take a look at it. It's a 3,000. It's a 3-pounder, high five, $1,000 front end gross profit, $4,000 of gross. Okay, at this point, I'm thinking, maybe the guy in the back of the room has a point. That's $4,000 of gross profit on a car that's been in the inventory for almost 90 days. Let's keep going and see what it looks like. Again, 30% commission at 16, so 30% of $4,000 is not $1,600, so we had to pay him that bonus, the salesperson a bonus for walking the car for 90 days plus. That's $2,100 a gross profit on a 90-day-old car. It's not horrible because 21 divided by 90 is $26. That's actually better than the 68-day car that we sold. So let's look at them all together. Do I want to say that, hey, maybe it's okay to keep a car 90 days? Because I did make $2,100, and it really is $26 a day profit, which is better than the 13 on the 68-day car. But how often does that really happen? Whenever I have that guy stand up at the back of the room and they always say that, I ask them when the last time that happened was, and they can't really remember, because the 90-day sale where you make a high gross profit is the rarity. It's the oddity. It's not anything you can even really put in the average. But here's why I want you to look at this. So we have the first car at $105 profit per day. And remember, this is a vehicle you invested $15,000 in. You wrote a check, it came out of your account, $15,000. The thing to look at is how much came back in. So if you do the APR, so I spent $15,000, $105 a day. I spent $15,000, it was $13 a day. I spent $15,000, I got $26 a day. Okay, those all sound okay, I understand it, but what's my real return on investment, my real ROI? Why not put it into an APR? So I cheated a little bit. I wrote myself a cheat sheet so I knew exactly. But the scenario 3 is actually a 56% APR. So the calculation is actually not too complicated. It's I put $15,000 in the bank. I left that $15,000 there for 90 days, and I made the profit turned out to be, and then you leave that as an X, it's 56% APR. I'm thinking again, 90-day car, and I'm making 56% on my money. That's probably not too bad of a deal. Again, that's the oddity. That's the one-off. That's the one we don't really even add it as average. Let's focus on the 68-day car, because we know we all try to get that 12, 14. I know people are reaching for a 15-time turn every year. So a 68-day-old car should be about the oldest thing that you have. That 68-day car, that $13 per day, turns out to be 32% return on investment, 32% APR. For an aged unit, 32% return on your money is not too bad, and that's an annual percentage rate. So at 30%, you're thinking, maybe a 68-day-old car is not that bad. Here, let me show you why it really is not that great, because that first scenario, the car that was 20 days old, that was a 255% APR. Yeah, 255%. And I know everybody's going, hey, how do you do that math? That's some kind of funny math. That's not really, guys, that's it. You look at it this way, you put $15,000 in the bank, and you go back 20 days later, and you get 17.5 or 17.1 out of that account. That's 255% APR that you earned on that $15,000. This is a fantastic business. It's the greatest business in the world. So I think if you look at those numbers, I think it's fairly indisputable that it's a different way of looking at your used car department. If you go in and and I'm not saying, I know a few folks that are working on putting that on a dashboard so they can actually look at the profit per day, and they're putting in the APR so they can really see what's happening on their investment. I don't maybe advise going in and doing that, but at least spot check your used car sales. Go in and take a look at those, especially the ones, and I think you'll find that there's some opportunity to change that DNA using that formula. So let's talk about the metrics that we measure, right? We just talked a little bit about maybe some new metrics that you've never used. I think they're great, and I think you should use them. But what are the ones we use now? Well, there's all kinds of things to look at when it regards to used car sales. My favorite one, the one that I see dealers use the most to change their DNA, is the trade close ratio. And you look at it on all levels. So trade close ratio is how many folks came in with a trade that we got to appraise, and how many of those appraisals did we actually win and take in either wholesale or retail. You look at that as a store level for the month. You look at it at a manager level for the month, the week, the day, however you want to look at it. And you also look at it at a salesperson level. And here's the thing. So going back, and I'll refer to it a lot, we have our sales folks now, we're moving into the millennial sales force. They pass a lot of certified tests. So if you're a Ford store, then a lot of your salespeople are Ford certified. These younger folks, they'll get on there, the millennials, they'll pass every test. They know a lot about your Ford inventory. But what they don't know about is the Dodge Ram that got traded or the Toyota that get traded in. They don't have the same level of comfort with that trade-in vehicles they do the vehicle they're selling. So sometimes human nature says if you're not familiar with it, you're typically not comfortable with it. So if they're not comfortable with it, they may not be handling it the way they should be. Again, we have a policy and a procedure in place for that, but maybe they're not following through on that, or maybe they're shortcutting it. You could have a salesperson that's one of your better sales folks. They might even be leaders of the board, but all of a sudden you look at their trade close ratio, and for every 10 cars they look at, they only bring in one car. Something's not quite right there. Now, going back to, hey, that's a great learning, teaching moment. It's a great learning, teaching thing you can focus on with that salesperson. So now they're still selling the same amount of cars. Maybe they don't sell any more cars, but now they're taking in 2, 3, 4 times as many trades. And what percentage of the trades they take in you actually get to retail? It's one of the things that we overlook. We sometimes take for granted that, again, that policy and procedures in place. So take a look at that. That's one of the best metrics to measure to gain growth in your used vehicle operation. Change your DNA. And we talked about profit per day. Look at your profit per day average. This is the one thing that some guys are actually putting on their daily doc sheet. Look at your profit per day average. You'll find the guys that need help. We know the guys on the bottom of the list need help. We know our sales managers that desk fewer deals, they may need some help. But this really shows, even you might have a guy that's high in numbers, but you look at the profit per day, and that's low. It's just another indicator to give you an opportunity to improve your business, to change that part of your DNA, whether it's new or used car department, it's any department you want. But that profit per day for used cars it's almost a litmus test for profitability, and to see if those folks are following policy and procedure put in place for profitability. Report cards. The software, we talked about the software that's available. Lots and lots of what they call report cards are available in there. The only thing I want to talk about this is again, the data that's gathered, the push and pull of all these software that we have. Make sure your data is right. So when you're looking at those report cards, make sure that's accurate. You want to identify the right teaching learning situation based on what you're seeing on those report cards. And it's parts, service. It's the counter guys in the back. It's the body shop. It's the labor rates. It's all that. Make sure that's accurate when you're looking at those report cards. That's the main thing on the one top of there. Let's move into product and inventory, because that's the biggest piece of your DNA that you can change. I wouldn't say it's the easiest to change, but you can change it faster. You can make quicker reaction times on that. And the two things we learned, talking about profit per day, is the price and the age. Those are the things that make the difference. In our example, we used aging and pricing to show profit per day and then turn that into an APR. So how do we identify we obviously want the highest profit per day, and we want the best return on our investment. Well, there's two things that are changing right now in that product and inventory category. You want to be able to take your inventory management system. Again, going back to do they push, do they pull, make sure that when you're pricing in one, it's actually being picked up by the other. Two things you have to look at. You have two IMSs, and sometimes this gets confusing. You have an internet management system, and you have an inventory management system. And everybody says IMS, but they may not be meaning the same piece of software. So your internet management system, that's the best way to describe that. That's what happens to your website. That's driven by your website. That's internet management. There's some third-party stuff that's managed otherwise, but that's the basic way to look at it, because your inventory management system, that's like your AAX, your Red Bumper, your Viato, First Look, and I think there's a few others out there if I forgot any. But that's how you manage your inventory. That's how you take in trades. That's how you evaluate or put valuations on vehicles. And it's really important to make sure that those are talking, your internet management system and your inventory management system. If you put price in one, if you change price in one, you want that to be able to change price in the other. That's super important. So with that said, now that you know they're working, we know that the sooner you sell the car, the higher gross profit you're going to have, the better return on your investment. But what if you have a vehicle that you don't really have enough data in your software, there's not enough local data available to know how that vehicle performs in the retail marketplace? That's where the pricing and aging comes into place. A lot of folks will be a little shy of those vehicles, and a lot of the systems will tell you percentage-wise where you're at in the marketplace with your price. So if it's a vehicle that you're not familiar with, the first thing, everybody just drops it down to the bottom. I want to be the first one that comes up on any search engine because my vehicle's the cheapest, because I don't understand it and I want to get rid of it. I don't want to take a chance. Okay, maybe. I get it, I understand it, but what about this? If you had a policy and a procedure in place for aging and pricing that didn't involve shoot right out of the bat with the absolute lowest price, so it's the car everybody sees. On the screen you can see, let's start with change that price in 10 days. Don't be the cheapest on that price. Put it mid-pack. But be prepared and have a policy and procedure in place to change it. Okay, we want to change it at 10 days. It doesn't sound we want to change it at 20 days. This one at 30 and 45 and 50, that's basically a 60-day hard turn. So you know at day 50, if it's not selling, you can be ready to take that vehicle to auction or dispose of it in some wholesale manner. I know that's a lot of effort, a lot of work. Now, a lot of the internet management systems, or a lot of the inventory management systems, both of them, majority of them anyway, will actually give you an alert. Hey, it's time to change this price. You can go in and set these parameters up inside the system, and you come into the office every day, it'll give you an alert. That's another one of those things. You got to make sure that there's a process in place for that and a policy behind it to push it. Now, okay, so let's say you can't do that. That's too much time, too much effort, too much energy. Do this, at least a 10, a 30, and a 55. Not quite as effective, but what I might suggest is this. If you have somebody that's really good at inventory management, they understand what a core vehicle is, a vehicle that sells for over the average gross profit, under the average turn time. Maybe you can look more at the 10, the 30, 55, because you know that car, data proves that vehicle sells faster and for over the average gross. You don't have to change the price. You don't have to work on a price aging process on that vehicle as often as you do one that you don't understand. So if you can put two pricing aging policies and processes in place, I know it sounds like but one thing, the systems will help you do it. They'll set up the alerts, and you will maximize your profit per day on both vehicles, the vehicle you know that's a high performer and the vehicle that you're not too sure of. I see it all the time. Everybody gets nervous about a car there's not enough data or information on. They drop it down to the bottom. Did they sell? Yeah, typically the car will sell, but it's like anything else. If it's cheap enough, if it's the first one that comes up and it's cheap enough, somebody's going to make that call. I don't think that's necessary. I think that's a bad process. Put that process in place to change that part of your DNA. Don't be scared of that car. Just put a process in place to price it and age it properly. Okay. Product. A couple things about product. The ones that it's kind of changing our DNA in our used car departments on its own. CPO. CPO is not the CPO of the way it used to be. And you remember the CPO used to be, hey, we'll throw it out on the lot, and if we get the right customer, we'll go ahead and put the warranty on it. Okay, it didn't happen that often, but that was always the thought process, and that's a thing of the past. CPO is more profitable now. I haven't looked at the numbers lately, but it's always for the past few years that number's been growing, profitability over non-CPO vehicles. The next thing to talk about is used car leasing. If you're not doing used car leasing, start looking into it. I know the manufacturers are really starting to take a closer look. There's a few captives out there that are already doing it. There's a few non-captives doing it, and it's growing. So, and those are the two most profitable parts, profitable ways to sell used cars. So what's driving that? Well, what's driving that is the 4 million for 2017. There's approximately 4 million lease returns that are going to terminate. Let's think about that for a second. 4 million lease terminations in 2017. And that's what's driving the CPO and the used car leasing. The captive finance companies don't want to keep those cars. They know they're coming. In fact, the captive finance companies are some of the best at used car inventory management. They know how many cars are coming, they know when they're coming, they know what areas they are, they know what areas of the country bring more money for certain models. They move vehicles all over the country for that reason. These guys are really good. So when you start seeing the CPO and the used car leasing, that's a result of these manufacturers, the captive finance companies, working together to get those cars back on the road and into the hands of the driving public through the franchise dealer. So let's see what that looks like. Let's talk about for a few minutes what do the captive finance companies start to finish on these lease terminations that are coming up. First part of that is a pre-turn-in. Pre-turn-in, anyway, and it varies between manufacturers. Captive, it can be anywhere between 90 days and 30 days out prior to the lease terminating. We have that information. You have that information through your captive finance company. It used to be I go back in the good old days where it used to be a big tractor printer in the business manager's office, and you'd ask for a list of lease terminations, and the thing would print off hundreds of pages of light green and dark green paper, and you throw it at the salespeople and tell them to make phone calls. Not very efficient, but at the time it was a good thing. Now, all you have to do is go to your system. It will give you that list, and most of that data is really good. You can email the customer, you can call the customers, a lot of things you can do with the customer. Again, some of that varies based on the captive finance company, but it gives you a real good heads up. This is where that end-to-end policy and procedure for inventory management comes into place. You know the cars that you need based on your inventory management system recommendations, your ideal inventory model. They're called other things, but the cars that, again, sell faster for higher gross profit, you know what those are. You can get a look at those before these vehicles are still in the customer's driveway. And you get a real advantage as the dealer to be able to see those vehicles in the driveway. So once they're through the driveway, they come to the grounding dealer. So you're the grounding dealer. A vehicle comes to your lot. You get first opportunity. You ground it, you put it in the system, the price is there, you either say yes or no, car comes into your inventory, you write the check, car comes into your inventory, or the car sits. So I know a lot of dealers that take great advantage. It's a great advantage. Typically the buy fee for a vehicle like that, some are zero, depending again on your manufacturer. But whatever they are, they're the lowest possible buy fee. The vehicle was brought to your dealership. We can think about that for just a second. It's the lowest possible buy fee. The vehicle was brought to your dealership. You didn't have to transport, you didn't have to leave, you didn't have to go to the auction, you didn't have to send anyone to the sale. And thirdly, the best of all, you've got a story. That car was leased at your dealership, it was serviced at your dealership. What a great conversation to have in the sales process of selling that vehicle. You know that vehicle from start to finish. It doesn't get any better than that. So you don't buy that vehicle. What happens to it? Well, that's the next series of remarketing. So you don't buy that vehicle, it goes up and it's available to like manufacturers. Like you're a Honda store, all the Honda dealers will be able to see that vehicle that's for sale. Now, here's something we got to think about for a second. I travel the country, I talk to a lot of dealers, I talk to a lot of used car guys, I work in their offices with them. They look at that and they say, hey, that dealer passed on those cars. All these cars are cars that dealers passed on. And I know in this area, I know most of those dealers and I know those used car managers, and they passed on them, so they must be bad vehicles. I'm not going to buy them. Okay, if you didn't buy it, was it a bad vehicle? The 3 or 4 that you grounded at your dealership, you didn't buy, were they bad vehicles? No, they weren't bad vehicles, they just didn't fit my ideal inventory model. Okay, hang on a second then. Could it be possible that the other dealers, when they passed on those grounded vehicles and they became non-grounded and available for you, they didn't fit their ideal inventory model? I mean, guys, with the data that's out there, that's how you look, especially these low mileage, one owner lease returns. First of all, most of them are still under warranty. And if there's damage that's going to devalue the vehicle, that's going to be noted on the condition report. So I think we need to look at those a little bit differently. They're non-grounded. That dealer didn't buy them. Does not mean they're bad or there's something wrong with them. Typically that means that dealer has the data. They know that they already have 4 of those like vehicles in stock, or there's something going on in the new car department. Maybe there's a manufacturer bonus or something on that type of vehicle, and that used vehicle will not work on their lot. So don't let your buyers, whoever that is, I don't know if you have your used car manager doing it or BDC person, an inventory, whoever it is, take a look at that with them. Sit down with them and say, hey, what cars are you passing on? What's available that's grounded at other dealerships that's available to us? Let me see some of those cars and talk about it. Make sure they're taking advantage of that. Again, reason why you don't have the story from the other dealership. You do have the story of it was purchased locally or leased locally at another franchise dealer. But you know it's a one owner, it's low mileage, and it's probably going to be close enough. The transport will be very, very effectively and affordable for the transport, and the fact that the buy fee is still lower. So it's the second best way to acquire late model, one owner, low mileage vehicle. Now here's a great opportunity for the franchise dealer of all franchises, different ones. But what happens is this. So it's, you know what cars are coming to your dealership. You know that up to 90 days prior. When the car gets to your dealership, you have the opportunity to buy that from the captive finance company for the lowest possible buy fee. The vehicle's already on your lot, and typically if it's your lot, it's the car that you leased originally, so you got a great story. Secondly, you can buy those cars that the other guys pass on at the other franchise dealerships, all within your franchise. The next one is all these manufacturer captives, if they can't sell it to you, the dealer that's grounded, if they can't sell it to any of the franchise dealers in the market, then they put it up to what we call first open. So it's the first opportunity for someone outside the franchise network to be able to buy those vehicles. Now think about this for a second. One owner, low mileage, lease returns, a lot of them have factory warranty still, and all you need to buy these vehicles, you can be a wholesaler. All you have to do to be able to buy those vehicles. And here's what's taken place over the last few years. There's folks that have seen this as an opportunity, and they've taken advantage of it. So it could be a wholesaler, it could be an independent retailer that they make these purchases. They'll take these vehicles out, they'll recondition them to CPO standard. So if it needs a set of tires, they'll put tires on there. They probably won't put the same tires you would put on there. They change the oil and filter, and the oil filter is all white and has no numbers on it, so we don't know actually who even made the oil filter, and they put oil in it of some sort. They detail the car, they make sure it is CPO eligible, and they take it to the auction. And guess who buys it? You do. Okay, I see it all the time. We track those numbers, we track those by VIN. That's what happens. So it was too expensive to buy when it got grounded at your store, or you didn't like the condition of the vehicle. You looked at it when it was available to everybody, and nobody bought that car because of price or condition. A wholesaler now buys that vehicle, excuse me, reconditions it, runs it through the auction, and then you buy it. Now you got to transport it. You got to pay higher buy fees, right? And it may or may not have the same type of equipment or the same type of tires and reconditioning that you would have done and money you would have made in your fixed operations, right? So make sure you look at all that. And here's the big opportunity. If I'm a Toyota dealer, I go to that first open opportunity, that fourth box there, and I say, you know what, I do pretty good. My ideal inventory model for Honda says Hondas are a good seller. 2013 Accord LSs do real well on my lot. I sell them faster for over the average gross. Guess where you now have an opportunity as a Toyota dealer to be able to acquire those vehicles prior to going to auction. That's the spot. So what I would say to that is make sure you understand your closed marketplace. It's I don't know my Honda VIPs, I know Ford Accelerate. Everybody knows what those are. That's the system you use to ground and buy lease returns. Again, it goes back to, am I taking total advantage of all the software and websites that are available to me to be able to acquire vehicles and be profitable? That's one of those things. So whoever it is that's buying you, if it's your used car manager, if it's an inventory manager, BDC manager that's running your closed manufacturer's website to be able to acquire those lease returns, make sure you're taking full advantage of that because that's a great opportunity. And again, you have the advantage because you have full visibility from prior to the lease up to 90 days or so out of that lease to the time where it's available to the very first. Everybody else just has that first open opportunity. So take advantage of that. A couple things on the process. So two things, there's process and there's policy, and make sure we understand the difference. So hey, hopefully there's a handbook or an employee handbook where you actually have printed policy in general. Typically what we don't do those, we don't print processes and the policies for sales. The difference between a policy and a process is this. A process is the thing or the action or activity, where a policy is kind of the power or the rule that backs that up. I mean, why do we do this? Well, it's policy. The policy says that we do A, B, C, and D, whether that's in a sales process, whether that's parts, service, whatever that is. But what we need to make sure we have in place is something the managers, the salespeople, and I don't care if it's parts, service, sales, it's everybody, we have to be absolutely clear on what those are. Everybody has to have a process, and they have to follow it. Earlier, I tasked you with making up a email account and doing an inquiry to use vehicle sales. See, watch what that process is. You'll see breaks in that process. Hopefully, you won't see any breaks in that process, but that's what triggers that email. Should trigger a process. So watch that process and see what happens. See if it does break anywhere. Hopefully it won't break anywhere. But if it does, you know you've triggered a process. A process should have been triggered. Watch what happens. See where you need to make those changes. People DNA, this is the biggest part. We talked earlier. The history and whether it's experience of your people make a big difference. That's their DNA makeup. How does their DNA makeup fit in with your dealership's DNA? Well, I'll give you an example. History and job experience, you have a used car manager you love, you've had him for 20 plus years, he retires and moves to Sun City Grand, he retires or moves to whatever it is. You need a new used car manager. You're a Chevy franchise dealership. There's a guy out of state from a Ford that's been at a Ford dealership for 15 years that comes with impeccable references. You really like the guy, the chemistry's there. You hire them, they come in, they've never worked at a Chevy dealership. You pull in the next morning and there's a bunch of F-150s parked in the used car front line of your Chevy dealership. Is that a bad thing or a good thing? I don't know, could be either. But that's just part of that's part of his background, that's part of his history, that's part of his experience of DNA that he brings now to your store. Again, I don't think it could necessarily be a bad thing, but what you don't want to do is if you've had Chevy 1500s that you've been very successful with, don't replace them, just add the 150s that he's familiar. He's bringing those cars, those vehicles in because he's familiar with them, he understands them, and he knows he can be profitable with them. So could be a great thing. You could now have incremental business that you didn't have before. So just make sure when those changes happen, make sure that DNA is a match. Make sure you understand what they're doing. Life experiences could be different. This gets into this is HR issue, things that you need to kind of be careful with, but if they have life experiences that they bring to the store, is it bad? Is it good? It could, again, same thing. It could be either one. It's just habits and things to look at, and we'll talk about that for a second. Those are the things you have to be careful with. The job and the history experience that comes in and makes changes in your dealership, those things you can control, those things you can get reports on and look at, and have those learning opportunities with if necessary. Habits, personal and professional. Again, it's an HR thing that you got to be kind of careful of, but with the proper policy in place in that handbook and the proper process for follow-up, you can actually gain things. Let me give you some examples. So on the personal, it's that sales rep that comes in, or it could be parts or service even. Their company shirt has they've washed it 5 million times. It's now got the collars. There's got to be something in place to them, it's okay, right? That's a personal habit. They just put the shirt on and they go. You need to be aware that is a customer experience issue. When they pull up on the service drive, when they shake the customer's hand out on the used car lot, when they walk up to the parts counter, that's just kind of a first impression customer experience issue that you need to be aware of. So there needs to be a policy procedure in place for that as well. The ones that make it a little hard, you got things like smoking, you got things that are very sensitive issues that you must have policy and procedure in place to handle, because again, those things are, hopefully we don't deal with a lot of that stuff. Back in the Joe Verdi days where he talks about the huddle, which I hope none of you have the huddle anymore. I think those are also things of the past where everybody's out there smoking and drinking coffee. If you do have that, please get rid of it. But those are things that our customer experience, that will affect our customers' experience, their personal habits. Some of those are professional habits. Those all need to change. You need to have policy and procedure in place for those. But be sensitive to them because they are HR. Now, a lot of this can be changed because when you hire someone, you have those proper policies, procedures in place, and you have clearly defined expectations. And I think that's where I see a lot of us kind of drop off. We go, okay, I've got an employee manual when they get hired. They got to read the whole thing. They got to sign off that they read it. Then we move them into their department. We have a great onboarding session. They understand everything we do in that department. They understand their responsibilities. They understand what they're supposed to do. Did we really give them a true process to follow? Is it written out? And did we make it absolutely 100% clear of what that process is supposed to look like? Did we make it, and did we ever, once we do that, how do we hold them accountable to make sure that happens? Our managers have to do that. But the key there is I don't think we clearly define, there's job descriptions, and then we show them what to do. Sometimes we just tell them what to do, but sometimes I don't think it's as clearly defined as it should be. Because remember, a lot of these folks, they're bringing those other habits, they're bringing those other things into our store's DNA. We need to make sure that it fits, or we need to change them. But I think if we have clearly defined operations and then hold them accountable, it changes everything. And I think that's some of the places where we can really make improvement in our stores and our used car department's DNA. And that's it. I'll take any questions you guys have. I guess that's it.